All right, it's That's Enough Out of You podcast with Bill and Sean. How's it going, Sean?
Hey, buddy, how's things?
I'm doing pretty good. I've been. I don't know if you heard of this thing, Sean, called TikTok.
Yeah,
it's this new thing that all the kids are doing these days. New craze. But I've been like addicted to TikTok lately. I've been watching all these. There's a lot of good stuff on there, a lot of funny stuff. There's this comedian. I want to give him a quick shout out. His name is Troy Bond, and he's like a New York comic, and he does these little they're like quick little minute long things on TikTok. It's like he calls it modern Seinfeld, and he does the characters really, really good. He imitates George, Jerry, and Kramer, and he films them all separately, and he looks like them in the and he just does it really, really good. Like there's the topics, they'll talk about, like George says, he says they broke up with me, Jerry. They broke up with me. I used the wrong pronouns. and then like Kramer comes busting through the door. And he'll go, I stormed the Capitol, Jerry. I stormed it.
Seinfeld is still my favorite comedy, buddy.
Oh, it's great.
Seinfeld, I can still watch those old reruns. It's
one of those shows that'll never be like out of style. You know what I mean? Like it's always going to be relevant. It's just so good.
Yeah, it was the ultimate comedy. I mean, it was great.
But this guy does a really good job. Troy Bond, if you can look him up. I think he's on YouTube too. So you don't have to be.
All right, we'll have to check that out.
Check him out. He's really funny. All right, Sean, what's our topic today, man?
Well, Bill, we're going to get into the disappearance of Jimmy Hoffa. I know this has been a request from quite a few of our listeners, and they want to talk about that. So we're going to get into it tonight, buddy.
All right, let's get into it.
All right, pal. So we're not going to do a bio, of Jimmy Hoffa. What we're going to do, this is going to be strictly just that, mostly on the disappearance and stuff. But Bill, I think before we even start, the one thing I think the crime reporters that cover this and a lot of the media people and even some authors and stuff, they make some serious mistakes when they're just trying to solve this mystery of what happened to Jimmy Hoffa. And the number one mistake that I think they make is Russell Buffalino. And of course, that's a name that me and you know well because, we grew up in Northeast Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
And of course, he ran the crime family, the local crime family here. And I think a lot of people just have this mistake about him. They make this mistake about him that he really didn't have much power nationwide. And he was this small-time boss who ran a small-time family, which, I mean, this family was pretty small compared to, the other families nationwide. It was only probably at the height, maybe 20 to 25 members. But the power that he had, Bill, nationwide was unbelievable. And it came from the respect. It didn't come from the fact that he ran a large family, because it was a small numbered family.
Mm-hmm.
But the power and the respect that he had from every boss, from Los Angeles to down to Florida, up to New England. I mean, it's really unprecedented. And this is where he got his power. And he was so powerful, Bill, that there's even some FBI reports that said in the late 70s, when the Genovese family, which is one of the 5 families in New York that make up the commission, when they were having some issues with their leadership, that Buffalino took over as the acting boss for a short time.
Right.
So this shows you the power that this man had. And the thing is, he was the main guy controlling Jimmy Hoffa, and his cousin was Jimmy Hoffa's lawyer, and everything had to go through Buffalino to deal with Hoffa. So say, a family like, say, Carlos Marcello down in New Orleans, he wants a loan from the Teamsters to build a casino or something. He would have to go through Buffalino, and he would broker a meeting between him and Hoffa, and they would sit down and they would broker out a deal, and Russ would treat everybody with respect. So this is where he got the respect from every boss from Tony Accardo in Chicago to Gambino in New York, to Fat Tony Salerno in the Genovese family. I mean, he was really close to Buffalino. So I think a lot of people just, dismiss a lot of these things based on, Buffalino was a small time boss. That's not true.
Well, if Martin Scorsese makes a movie about you, you're pretty important.
Well, sure. And we'll touch on that movie, Bill, because there's a lot, and we're going to talk about a couple books here too, because there's a lot of inaccurate stuff and, not factual stuff, but that doesn't mean everything is not, not true. So we're going to cover all that. And then I think the other mistake that people make is they don't realize how close Jimmy Hoffa, Russell Buffalino, and Frank the Irishman Sheeran were. I mean, Frank Sheeran was an Irish gangster that obviously he couldn't be made, but he was brought in by Buffalino, and then Buffalino sent him to really protect Hoffa and protect Hoffa's interest and return their own interest. And the three of them were like tight as could be. I mean, Hoffa and Sheeran were very close, and Hoffa and Buffalino were close. And Sheeran and Buffalino, they went everywhere together, and their families were friends. They would travel together with their wives. I mean, they were very close. So again, when you talk about organized crime, 99% of the hits, Bill, is one best friend killing another. It's the guy who has access, the guy who's close to the victim, is the guy they're going to send in, Bill.
The guy you trust the most.
Yes, and that's the guy that's going to end up killing you.
Yep.
And I think another thing that people make a mistake about with Jimmy Hoffa is for some reason I seen him portrayed as that he was Italian. Jimmy Hoffa was not Italian. Jimmy Hoffa was German Irish. Kind of like that line in the Godfather, Bill, my Kraut Mick friend.
Right.
I mean, that was Jimmy Hoffa. And I think a lot of people don't, associate him with being Irish because he had such a feud with the Kennedys, especially Robert Kennedy. We know him and RFK, they went at it. So I think a lot of people make that mistake, but Hoffa was very Irish, and a lot of his close associates like Frankie Sheeran, like O'Brien. I mean, these guys, Fitzsimmons, who we're going to talk about, his inner circle, a lot of them, most of them were Irish, and he didn't actually trust a lot of the Italian gangsters, except for Russell Buffalino. Russell Buffalino was the one exception, and he was his closest associate, that was Italian. And, I just think that's one thing that a lot of people just make a mistake on, Bill.
So where are we going to start here, Sean?
Well, we're gonna start, Bill. We're gonna start with basically, right before the disappearance, because this is, it's not really going to be a bio about Hoffa. We're going to get into what really happened, and I got an opinion on what I think happened, and it's going to be in the minority. I know a lot of people's going to say that they don't agree with me and this and that, but I'm going to explain it, and we'll go from there.
All right.
So James Riddle Hoffa, he was president of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, and he gets convicted of jury tampering and wire fraud in 1964. Okay, and that's when Frank Fitzsimmons takes over as acting president. And Fitzsimmons, Bill, he wasn't as charismatic as Hoffa, and Hoffa could say no to the mob. Hoffa was very arrogant. He would, a lot of the mob bosses actually didn't like Hoffa. He was very mouthy to them, and they, Fitzsimmons was a guy who was a yes man, and there, once he takes over as acting boss and eventually as acting president, and eventually as president of the Teamsters, the mob was very happy because they got whatever they wanted when Fitzsimmons was there. So they didn't want Hoffa back in power. And when he's in jail, Bill, okay, he gets in a fight with Tony Provenzano, who was a very powerful captain in the Genovese family, okay? And it's a bad fight. And the thing is, Hoffa hit him, okay? Now, Bill, that's a death sentence. Hitting a made man it's a death sentence, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, the thing is, this fight happened in like 1971, okay? So right there, Hoffa should have been killed. And it would have been easier for the mob to take him out in prison because they could have had him shanked in there. But he didn't. And Tony Pro obviously wanted to kill him, but he wasn't killed. And that's going to be part of the reason why I'm going to explain what I think happened, and the only explanation that makes sense. So Hoffa, what happens is Nixon ends up pardoning Hoffa, okay? And he gets out of prison, but the agreement was he can't be involved with the unions. And Hoffa was really upset when he heard this. So when he gets out, he's not being quiet. He's making a lot of noise, and he's making a lot of enemies. He's going after Fitzsimmons, and like I said, all the mob bosses are happy with Fitzsimmons, and Jimmy's going after him, and he's trying to take him out. And then on July 30th, 1975, at Max's Red Fox restaurant right outside of Detroit, Jimmy was supposed to have a meeting with Anthony Giacalone, who was a captain in the Detroit family, which is one of the 26 families, and Tony Pro Provenzano from the Genovese family. Okay. And here's what the witnesses said, Bill, that Hoffa was there at the restaurant, and it was in the afternoon. And the reason Jimmy wanted the meeting at this restaurant is because he knew Provenzano wanted him killed. He knew Fitzsimmons wanted him killed. So he knows these guys are going to try to take him out, but they're not going to do it in a public place like that. So he wanted the meeting in public in the afternoon at a restaurant where there's a lot of people there, and frankly, where he would feel safe. And from all the witnesses, what happened is Jimmy was waiting, and they never showed. And then he made a call to his wife, and he was yelling and screaming that Giacalone and Provenzano never showed. And the next thing, witnesses said that after that phone call, a car pulled up, and he was talking to people in the car. Most witnesses said there was 3 people two in the front, 1 in the back, and Jimmy was talking to them, and there was no altercation. There was no, he seemed like he was laughing, and they were having, a cordial conversation. And next thing you know, Jimmy gets in the car and leaves the restaurant, and he's never seen again. Okay, Bill? And the stories, Bill, all the rumors, every couple of years, it seems they're digging up somewhere to find Jimmy Hoffa and
buried under the Meadowlands.
The Meadowlands. Yeah. Everywhere, Bill,
yep.
And here's where I'm going to say, I'm going to go against what a lot of people have to say, because, and we're going to talk a lot about the movie, The Irishman. We're going to talk a lot about, a couple of the books, the book, I Heard He Paint Houses, which is on, a lot on Frank Sheeran, and The Quiet Don, which is a book on Buffalino. And we're going to talk a lot about those books tonight, but because there's a lot of stuff in there that's inaccurate, Bill. And this is another thing I think people make mistakes on when they're trying to solve this mystery is, just because, Frankie Sheeran told a lot of things that aren't true, which is, a lot of it is not factual that he said, that doesn't mean he's lying about everything. And I really believe his story is the only one that makes sense in the disappearance of Jimmy Hoffa. And here's his story, Bill. So Sheeran said that he pulls up with O'Brien and another gangster by the name of Sally Buggs, and they pulled up to the restaurant, and they talked to Jimmy, and they told him, Sheeran told him, look, we're going to, Giacalone and Tony Pro are waiting at this house, and Russell Buffalino's flying in, and he's going to meet at the house because he's not comfortable meeting at the restaurant. And they're going to have a sit down with you, and Buffalino's going to back you up, and I'm going to be by your side to protect you. And, we're going to get you back in control of the union. And, Jimmy gets in the car, and he's real comfortable. He asks Sheeran if he has his friend with him, which is his gun, and he does. Mm-hmm. And they pull up to the house in Detroit, and the two stay in the car, and Hoffa and Sheeran get out, and they go into the house. And when they get into the house, Sheeran pulls his gun out, and Hoffa's still not concerned because he figures he pulled it out to protect them. And when he sees that there's nobody else in the house, Hoffa says, let's get out of here. He turns around and Sheeran shoots him in the back of the head.
Mm-hmm.
And then he said 2 cleaners came in, the Andretta brothers, and they cleaned up the scene. And they said, I think it was Sally Buggs drove Jimmy's body away, and they took him to a funeral home, and they to an embalmer, and that's it. He's ashes. The body's never going to be found. Okay. Now, when that story came out, Bill, you heard all the things. Everybody in the media, all the authors, they're saying that Sheeran's lying. Right. There's no way he did it. And here's the problem, Bill, is like in the book, I Heard He Paint Houses, and even in the movie The Irishman, like there's so much stuff in there that really is not accurate. Like we talked about all the Kennedy stuff. None of that stuff is true that's in there about the mob rigging the election and all that, and the mob being the masterminds behind the assassination, and Sheeran being involved with David Farry. There's no evidence of that at all. Even Sheeran doing the Joey Gallo hit, I don't see any evidence of that.
Right.
So I think that all that's a lie. But again, when we're talking about these monsters, Bill, and they got podcasts and they're writing books, and they all embellish themselves. They all put themselves in situations, and like even when you're talking about these CIA guys, they'll tell like one truth and it's sandwiched between 2 big lies. I mean, but you have to look at every situation, and the articles that come out and the podcasts that I hear from these crime reporters and stuff, they give a couple of reasons why they think Sheeran's lying. Okay. And the first one that just drives me crazy is just the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And I seen it in articles, I heard it on podcasts, but they say, when the mob was going to take out Jimmy Hoffa, they wouldn't use Frankie Sheeran because he wasn't Italian. And that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard, Bill. Whoever says that, and as a journalist, they should have their journalism credentials taken away. I mean, that's the dumbest thing I've ever. I mean, how many times have we talked about this on our show, Bill? The relationship between the Irish gangster, the Jewish gangster, and the Italian-American Cosa Nostra.
Right.
I mean, the Irish and the Jewish gangsters have been doing important hits for the mob for a long time. We could talk about the Westies, when John Gotti ordered the union boss O'Connor in New York, he had the Westies kneecap him. When Bugsy Siegel was taken out, one of the most infamous hits of all time, who did they go to? They went to Meyer Lansky, who's Jewish, and he had Jewish gangsters do that hit. So I mean, we could talk about Whitey Bulger, how many hits he did for the mob. I mean, it's just like Jimmy Burke in New York. I mean, it's just that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard, Bill. And again, it goes against everything in the mob because, again, what do we say, Bill? Who's the guy that pulls the trigger? It's the closest person to the victim.
And it makes sense, especially in this case, Sean, because you look at what Hoffa did. He wasn't going anywhere unless it was a public place.
Right.
Unless it was, the middle of the day. He knew there were going to be lots of people around. So he's not getting into a car.
No,
with
exactly,
people who doesn't 150% trust. Right?
And Bill, Jimmy Hoffa's own son said that.
Right.
There's nobody else that could have got him in that car than Frankie Sheeran. Now, did Frankie, did he get him to the house and somebody else pulled the trigger? I don't know. I wasn't there. Yeah. But, that could have possibly happened. But you can't get Jimmy Hoffa from the restaurant to that house without Frank Sheeran. And that's one thing, like, I mean, it's because even this, Bill, like people said, well, maybe they threatened him with a gun. Let me tell you something. If they pulled a gun at Jimmy Hoffa, he would have threw down in the parking lot with him and probably got shot right there. There's no evidence of that. There's no evidence of any confrontation.
But Sean, it was never solved. Right. So it leaves so much open. I mean, everybody and their brother was taking credit for killing Jimmy. I mean, that Richard Kuklinski, the Iceman, he claimed he killed him. Like how many guys claim that they?
Oh, a lot of people did, Bill. And you can't take anything that the Iceman said.
Right.
Well, nothing he said makes sense.
That's right.
But again, Bill, get Jimmy Hoffa from the restaurant to that house without Frank Sheeran. You can't do it. That's the problem. Like what the evidence suggests, because let me tell you something, Bill, he is not getting in that car with anybody associated with Tony Provenzano, and that includes Anthony Giacalone, because a lot of people say, well, Giacalone was friendly with Hoffa. He could have got him in. Listen, Hoffa's smart enough to know that Giacalone is very close to Tony Pro, and I think they were even related. I think they were cousins. Might have been true marriage, but they were very close. He is not getting in a car, with anybody. So because he knows Tony Pro wants to take him out and wanted to take him out for 5 years. And that's another thing we're going to talk about coming up. Why was Jimmy Hoffa not taken out in 71 when he knocked out Provenzano in prison? And there's a reason for that, Bill. And the reason for that is Russell Buffalino. And that gets me to the next thing is, a lot of people just want to say that, Buffalino is this small-time boss and he couldn't have ordered it. And it's like, listen, the guys in the media people in Detroit try to say it was a Detroit mob thing. Detroit mob couldn't make a move on this unless Chicago and the commission sanctioned it. And none of them were going to sanction it without the okay of Russell Buffalino. And it was because of the respect that they had for him and because he controlled Jimmy Hoffa. And the thing is, if you want the explanation for this, why was Hoffa not taken out in 71? And why did they have to wait to 75? Because for 5 years, Bill, everybody in the mob wanted Hoffa dead. Everybody. I mean, from Provenzano, Tony Salerno wasn't happy with Hoffa. Accardo in Chicago wasn't happy with Hoffa. Fitzsimmons wasn't happy with Hoffa. They all wanted him dead. And why did it take him 4 to 5 years to kill him? Because Russell Buffalino every time would protect him, would say, no, I'll talk to Jimmy, I'll do this. And the commission would not sanction the hit because they had too much respect for Buffalino. And that's where I think a lot of people they missed the boat on this, Bill. Because again, once there's a fist fight with Provenzano, that's a death sentence.
Right. Yeah.
That's a death sentence. So that happened in 71.
Yeah.
So Hoffa don't disappear to 75.
Right.
So Tony Pro wants him dead. Tony Pro wants him dead from 71 on. So who's protecting him if it's not Russell Buffalino?
Yeah.
Because the commission is happy with Fitzsimmons. They don't want Hoffa back in power because Hoffa was a headache for them. He really was. Yeah. Hoffa got involved with the mob simply because, when he got involved with the unions, the corporations and stuff, they were using a lot of thugs and they were breaking up these unions, trying to break them up. And he had to fight fire with fire. So he went to the mob. And that's why he got involved. But he didn't trust a lot of the mobsters outside of Russell Buffalino. And the only two guys he trusted is Sheeran and Buffalino. And there's nobody else that could have got him from that restaurant to that house. And there's nobody else that could have protected him for 5 years, Bill, because everybody else wanted to take him out. So what actually changed? What changed that Buffalino finally gave the okay? And what happened was there was a Time magazine article that came out, and we talked about Time magazine. Henry Luce, who was very close with the CIA, he owned that.
Yeah.
And the article comes out, and all of a sudden, here's Russell Buffalino, who's staying in the shadows. He wants to be, this guy that was working a driver or something at Canada Dry, staying in the shadows, working in a store, a little candy store, this and that. He does not want any publicity. He understands that you got to run things from the shadows. And here's this Time magazine article, okay, that comes out. There's Time Life, and it comes out and it's got the 26 families are listed in there and all the bosses are listed, and who's in there but Russell Buffalino's name, and it's tied to Jimmy Hoffa. And all of a sudden his name and Hoffa and Buffalino's name are right next together, and it's in every, it's in this magazine that's published all through the country. And all of a sudden, this guy that's in the shadows is not in the shadows anymore because he's tied to Jimmy Hoffa. So all of a sudden, the protection that Hoffa had, the only friend that he had inside Cosa Nostra, is gone. And then shortly after that, Jimmy disappears. So to me, Bill, that's the only thing that makes sense. He was Buffalino was the only guy that could have protected Hoffa for that long.
So explain that to me, Sean. Then what's the implication that they discovered Buffalino through Hoffa, or Hoffa?
What I'm saying, Bill, is I'm saying that all of a sudden, it's not that they discovered him, because the FBI is always on to Buffalino, but they couldn't really get anything on him because he stayed in the shadows so much, Bill, and he liked to be in the shadows. He did not want publicity. He understood, from Al Capone and these guys that want publicity, that never ends well. So when he finally sees his name in a national magazine, okay, and he sees it because of his association with Jimmy Hoffa, all of a sudden he's linked to Jimmy Hoffa, and it's in a national magazine. Now all of a sudden he's getting press that he does not want.
But how is that Hoffa's fault?
Well, because he's linked to Hoffa. He is linked to Jimmy Hoffa because he's the guy controlling Hoffa. His name is in that article because of Jimmy Hoffa, Bill. That's why he's getting. That's what the article put the emphasis on, the relationship between Buffalino and Hoffa, and how Buffalino was the broker for Jimmy Hoffa nationwide for any mob boss who wanted to deal with the Teamster Union. They had to go through Russell Buffalino. So that was because of his association with Jimmy Hoffa. So all of a sudden he's getting this bad press, this what he does not want. He's getting that because of his association with Jimmy Hoffa. So all of a sudden, the one friend that Hoffa has, he doesn't have anymore. Because Buffalino realizes, look, it's either me or him. Because now he's probably also had, I'm sure he had other mob bosses, Bill, pissing in his ear now, saying things like, hey, we've been telling you about this guy for years. See what I mean? Now you're associated with him, and you're in every, you're in magazine in every state in the country now. Knows who you are, and you're not in the shadows anymore. You understand what I'm saying?
I'm still confused, because now if Hoffa disappears,
right,
that's not going to benefit Buffalino. They're only going to come after him. They're going to investigate.
Well, I mean,
they're tied to each other, right? Doesn't that make sense?
They're tied to each other. That's true. But that's why Jimmy had to disappear, like, quietly. He just had to disappear. Jimmy couldn't be gunned down in a restaurant by three guys in a ski mask. That'll bring more heat. Yeah. And the other thing is, Bill, the way Buffalino planned it, he planned this around a wedding. So he had an alibi for all of this. And you saw the movie, Bill. You saw what they did with the wedding, where they left and they drove and then went to a private plane, and they did all these things to try to have that him and Sheeran both had an alibi to where they were.
Yeah.
When this happened. So he's going to do it as quietly as he can. But, the press that he's getting, Bill, he does not want this press. And it's because of Jimmy Hoffa. You're right, though, Bill. He's taking a risk. But what's the risk, though? Staying, keeping Jimmy alive and making it worse. I mean, at this point,
I guess that would be worse.
Well, I mean, the other thing is, Bill, a lot of people thought that Jimmy would have talked if he got arrested again. And the thing is, when he did time, he didn't talk, he didn't give anybody's name. But a lot of people inside the mob, they thought if Jimmy, this time he was so mad, he was so aggravated at everybody because he felt they blackballed him from his own union, that he probably would have ratted everybody. So that's another thing that probably they were telling Buffalino.
He did get a pretty nice chunk of change, though, didn't he? When he
did, but I don't think he did. He did. You're right. But to a guy like Hoffa, it wasn't about the money. It was about the power. It was about the control of his union.
Yeah.
And he wasn't happy that Fitzsimmons was in charge, and his ego, he couldn't get past it. And to me, that's the only thing that makes sense, Bill. It's the only, why Jimmy wasn't taken out in 71. Buffalino was protecting him, and then I think because of this article, that's what changed. Maybe it was something else, Bill. I don't know. But something changed where Buffalino finally gave the okay, because the commission wasn't going to do it without him. They weren't going to do it without Buffalino's approval. And there is one thing, though, Bill. There is one thing that that might change my mind on this.
Mm.
And that's Michael Francis. Michael Francis is ex captain in the Colombo family, and he has a podcast now, and he goes around the country speaking to young kids, trying to keep them out of that life and out of the gang life and stuff. And he said on one of his podcasts that Sheeran didn't do it, and he says he's pretty sure he knows who the killer was, and he's really close to him, and apparently he has tapes of a confession and everything, and at some point he might release it. And here's the things that Francis said about the killer. He said, number one is, he said the killer was Irish, so you could talk to all those idiot journalists that say that they wouldn't have went to an outsider. They said that he was Irish and somebody who's really close to Francis. And he said that the person is still alive. So when he said that, I immediately thought of three people. Number one, I thought of Jimmy Coonan from the Westies. Coonan and Francis were very close. Francis talks about him quite a bit on his podcast. He, I know he's close to Coonan's family. I don't know if he still is, but he was for a long time. And Jimmy's still alive. He's in prison. I think he's in his 80s now. But the timeline doesn't match, because Hoffa disappeared in 75, and it really wasn't until 77 that Coonan and the Westies made the deal with the Gambino family and Roy DeMeo to start doing hits for them. So,
and if the Westies did it, they would have found Hoffa's head floating in the Hudson River or something.
Yeah. So I don't think the timeline matches that. But the Westies were involved in a lot of these conspiracies that people say would matter. A lot of them, they said the Westies. But again, the timeline doesn't match. The second person I thought of was Mad Dog Sullivan, who technically wasn't a Westie, but he was an Irish gangster that the mob used a lot for hits. And he's been involved in these conspiracy theories. His name's popped up. He was the guy that supposedly killed Hoffa and buried him in the Meadowlands. But the thing is, he doesn't meet the criteria, because I've never read anything where him and Francis were close at all. And I'm almost positive that Sullivan is dead. So 2 of the 3 criteria he doesn't meet. And then the last one would be a guy by the name of Apples McIntosh, who was a associate of the Colombo family. What's that?
I said, you gotta love that name.
Oh yeah, great nickname. But he was a powerful associate who was very close to Carmen the Snake Persico, who was the boss of that family for a long time. And Francis and him are very close. And the thing is, though, I'm almost positive that he's dead. So he wouldn't meet the criteria either. So who Francis is talking about, I really don't know.
Well, when did he say this, though? What maybe the guy was still alive when he?
It was about I think less than a year ago that he said this, and I think I'm pretty sure McIntosh has been dead for quite a while.
Okay.
So,
but why? If see, this is what I find questionable when a guy like that says, "Well, I've got a tape that I'll release someday that's going to blow everybody away." Why doesn't he just release it if he really has it? That's what I don't understand.
I hear you, Bill. I hear you.
It creates a lot of doubt for me.
It does, but I will say that he has been pretty convincing on some other things that he said. But again, I'm just saying he would probably be the one guy to be able to change my mind if he came out with this and he gave an explanation and the evidence was good. Then I changed my mind on it. But like I can't answer that, Bill. I don't know why he just doesn't come out with it. I mean,
and he's one of these guys. I mean, he literally knows where the bodies are buried for a lot of these guys, and that I believe from him. I think that if he had, because he's talked about so much on his podcast, he doesn't hold much back. So why would he be holding that back? I
don't know, Bill. Maybe, I mean, the only thing, he said that he's very close to the killer.
And
He's
maybe
very close relationship. So
yeah.
maybe he doesn't want to just, maybe the guy's not ready to come forward. He doesn't want to give it up.
Yeah.
And why he's even said this much though, I don't know. Like you said, why even bring it up?
Right. Well, I mean, obviously he's going to draw people to.
Well, he's already got over 1 million followers, Bill.
Yeah, and I'm sure that's one of the reasons why.
Well, but again, he would be the one guy that I would take serious. But these other ones, Bill, these media guys and they just don't understand. I think the way even these guys that follow organized crime, like it's mind-boggling to me. Like I don't know. I guess it's the same with sports. To some of these sportscasters, like they followed the team and stuff, and they just don't know anything about the team. I just don't get it. Like these guys that follow organized crime and they're crime authors and crime reporters, and they just don't understand the way Cosa Nostra worked in this country. They just say things that just, everybody jumped on that thing that Sheeran's lying. And listen, he's probably lying about 70% of the stuff in there. But I think the one thing he's telling the truth is that, he got Jimmy Hoffa from that restaurant to that house where he was killed.
Well, there's no other way he's going to go. There's no
That's
other
what
way
I say.
He would have gotten into the car.
There's no way.
Taking all those precautions, he's not just going to all of a sudden throw caution to the wind and say, "Hey, I'll hop in these guys." What could go wrong?
Tell me who else got him in that car.
Right.
And you can't name anybody that was closer to him than Sheeran. You know. Yeah. So, and again, the other thing is, Bill, is you got to explain to me why he wasn't killed earlier than 75, because everybody in the mob wanted Hoffa dead for years. This was not something that just happened a couple months. I mean, everybody from Tony Pro, and Fat Tony Salerno, Tony Accardo, these are powerful people, Bill.
Mm-hmm.
And they wanted him taken out.
Yeah. And
who was protecting him? To me, there's only one guy that could have protected him, and that was Russell Buffalino.
Yeah.
So, I do, those books, I heard you paint houses in the Quiet Dawn. They're good books, but there's a lot in both of them that are not factual. I think Quiet Dawn, had an agenda there. Some of the stuff in there, I don't think is factual, but the stuff on Russell Buffalino being very powerful, I think he nailed it on that, because he was extremely powerful, and he was well respected from everybody from Santo Trafficante in Florida, Carlos Marcello, to old man Patriarca up in Rhode Island. I mean, they all respected Buffalino. And he was a guy that the bosses would call in, Bill, to counsel when they were having disputes, because they knew that he would respect both sides and he would give a voice to both sides, and everybody respected his opinion. And it's not because he ran this huge family. Like, I think that's where the disconnect is, where they think, like, why would the commission, who's got like 1,500 members, be afraid of a family that has 20? Mm-hmm. Well, that's not the point, Bill. It's not the point. They respect the boss,
right?
And they're gonna respect his opinion, and they're not gonna do anything to his guy. And Jimmy Hoffa is his guy, and they're not gonna do anything without his approval.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So that's all I got on that one, buddy.
It's a good one. It's a good one. This is a good episode. I think.
I'm sure we'll get some feedback on that, because we've been asked. A lot of people. I know the Ozman's been waiting on this. There's a few others that's been asking about this. Angelo asked about it.
Yeah.
So that's where we stand on this. I think Frankie Sheeran was telling the truth on that. At least the part where he got him to that house. Did somebody else shoot him? Maybe.
Mm-hmm.
But you're not getting Jimmy from that restaurant to that house without Frankie Sheeran. And that's where I stand on that, buddy.
Yeah. All right. That's a good one.
And that's enough out of you.
That's enough out of you, enough out of me.
That's what I say to all those media guys, Bill. All those doubters out there, buddy.
And also Richard Kuklinski. We have to do an episode on that.
Yeah, we'll do one on him, Bill, because he's and Francis talked about him on his show that he never even heard of him until when he was on the street and stuff. He never. Yeah. So, Kuklinski was a serial killer, but I don't think he had any ties to, especially Roy DeMeo.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask you about. Yeah.
Yeah, the only connection I could ever find to DeMeo was that Klinsky was involved with this other guy. They were doing porn movies and stuff and putting videos out on the street and stuff, and DeMeo was shaking them down.
Okay.
And that's the only connection I ever found to DeMeo. And we got to do a show on DeMeo because
definitely.
He's probably the craziest gangster in Cosa Nostra history, maybe.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't believe much of the Kuklinski stuff. But he was a serial killer, but I just don't think he had any mob ties.
Yeah.
He just added all that. And that's the problem with these guys, Bill. They just embellish themselves. When they're writing books and doing podcasts and everything else, they want to get themselves involved in every story, from the JFK assassination to the Castro attempts and everything else. They want to put themselves in the Joey Gallo hits, and you got to weed through all the lies to get to the truth, buddy. That's what we try to do.
Who would ever thought a gangster would lie about stuff like that, right?
Imagine that, Billy.
All right, Sean. Good episode. Right. Another good episode, and we got a lot of great stuff coming up. Just stay with the podcast. Give us a follow. Give us a like and a rating, and review. You got to give us a good review, though, right? That's the key. If you're going to review, if you're going to go to the trouble to give us a review on Apple Podcast,
yeah, give us a 5-star.
Yeah, give us a 5-star and a good review. Give us say some nice things about us, because there's
some good ones on there, Billy.
I know there's already good ones on there. We want to see more.
We do.
And subscribe on YouTube. Got
please.
A lot of views on YouTube, and not a whole. The subscriptions
don't match the views.
No, so let's go. Click that subscribe.
Just hit that red button. That's all you got to do. It doesn't cost you anything and helps us out.
If you're listening to this right now on YouTube, look at your screen and look down. There's that little button that says subscribe. All you have to do is click it, or if you're on your phone, just touch it. That's all you have to do. Just pretend that there's a smudge on your phone and you try to wipe it off or whatever. Whatever gets you to touch it. All right. We're not going to beg.
No, but I mean, somebody sends a 6-paragraph email. You think they'd be able to just hit one button on subscribe? You know what I mean?
All right, man.
All right, buddy.
All right. Enough out of you.
Good night, everybody.